Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Hammer of Truth. My name is Mike, or I go by Natafan on social media.
And I'm Miriam, and I go by Boho Hippie Historian on TikTok. And a few months ago, it's been a few months?
Been a few months now.
Yeah, we met on a one of my TikToks. Do you remember what it was? Was it mine or yours?
I'm pretty sure it was yours.
Yeah?
Yeah. Talking about religion, because that was how we first met.
Yeah, and we realized that we touched on a few things that we had in common, but on the same note, we found that we also differed in some of our opinions on how to accomplish the same task. But what we appreciated was we did it in such a respectful way, and it was such a wonderful dialogue that we thought it was a great opportunity to show everybody else struggling with a similar dynamic how it can be done.
Yep.
So here we are.
So we are looking forward to what Hammer of Truth will become. We are looking forward to having you guys come along with us on this journey and enjoy the first episode talking about the primaries, the politics, and a little bit of Palestine in there too. So life in the United States has been very interesting over the last, 6 months, huh? We almost shut down. We've gotten rid of a Speaker of the House for like the first time in I don't know how long. Has it ever happened? I can't even remember. I think it might have happened one other time is what I remember.
I think it's happened one other time. Yeah.
But it hasn't happened in like 100 years or something insane like that.
No, we all knew it would come though. The very moment he made the deal, we knew it was only a matter of time.
It was. And now we are in the midst of a primary, like officially in the midst of the primary, i.e. we've had primary elections now officially on both sides. The New Hampshire Democratic primary, unfortunately, was not a real primary, as much as everyone likes to think otherwise. So now there's real talk about Biden, Trump, and all the other people running. Actually, this is, you and I have talked about the Republican and Democratic Party, and I know you have very strong feelings when it comes to both of the parties at this point, and I completely understand, and in many ways I agree. But I was actually, I'd be interested to get your take on the Republican Party, specifically Nikki Haley compared to Trump, and your thoughts on her. I mean, while it is very unlikely as it stands right now that she will become the Republican nominee, if some fluke thing happened and she became one, what are your thoughts on her compared to the Trump that we all know and adore?
I don't know that Nikki Haley is going to be much better. Like, honestly, I really don't. I think when we're looking at terms of our presidential choices, I mean, the lesser of two evils is it's probably the most fitting thing that we can the most fitting name we can give to this right now. But Nikki Haley has said, she very much supports a very similar platform to Trump. So I don't think in, making Nikki Haley the nominee, we really avoid terribly much more than we would avoid with Trump.
I mean, she did famously say that the United States was never a racist country.
Yeah.
And being it Black History Month, I feel like that is. Whew.
I mean, yeah, the sheer ignorance among, what still remains the right side just absolutely blows me away. Their unwillingness to, have some sort of discussion with, just be intersectional. They're completely shut off, and it's a real shame. But Nikki Haley is as much of a danger to us as Donald Trump. And honestly, I think she's at this point running for that VP position. But I don't know that Donald Trump would put a woman in VP.
No.
No. So, but
Did you see, by the way, did you see how fast Vivek Ramaswamy, from the moment that he dropped out, just bowed, kissed the feet of Trump in order to, that his hope is to be on the cabinet, at least in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And don't worry, Vivek, we'll edge you even then.
Oh,
but, so I actually, when I was looking, because, right now, I would love nothing more. I'm sure you've seen, I would love to get Trump out in the primaries, and unfortunately, our two choices now, really they've come down to Trump and Nikki Haley. And that is unfortunate. But at one point, I had looked into Vivek. He is ever constantly changing his views, because for a few moments he was speaking against Israel and the money that we were providing to them. And I thought, at least, as ick as he was, if he had that, then maybe we could work with something. But that was like less than 12 hours later, he came out in support of Israel after reading that article. And
that's that's the problem with the Republican Party in the end. It's not that some of these people, their actual beliefs in things might not actually resonate with people, at least in the middle, consider themselves independent. They are so obsessed with holding on to this base, or trying to grapple some of this base that are considered MAGA in this country, that they are willing to say and support anything in order to hold on to them. I feel like, the center, and I know there are issues with the people that are Democrats that are supporting Biden to the level that they are. Like, we've had discussions. I don't have issues with people supporting Biden. I had issues with people saying that we have to support. We have to. It's that have to that I struggle with, because that word just automatically breaks when it comes to the fact that we are a democracy, and the whole point of voting is to try and get the people that you want and not say we have to do anything. It's the primary. When the general election comes, I know everyone hates the idea of the lesser of two evils, but if you got two evils, you are picking the lesser of two evil, and a non-vote is still a vote. I know there are people that argue against it, but it really is. Now, it may be looked at a little bit differently, but in the end, if you aren't voting for someone and you normally would lean one direction, it is taking that vote away that potentially could have kept the other side from winning. I feel like if we as a country of especially independents, who are like the largest base now in the country, it's like 60% of the country is considers themselves independent, or maybe it's 50. I don't remember. It's really high. There are more independents than in either party by themselves, and now after everything that's gone on, it might even be higher. But it's I feel like if we got moderate Republicans, moderate Democrats, and all the independents together, we could ignore the MAGA. We could easily ignore the MAGA. And again, we are. It's tough. It is so tough, and I've mentioned this so many times. We live in a this is going to be the most hectic time period in our life, because as a globe, forget as a nation, as a global entity, we are progressing left. Now, I know some people want it to progress faster than others, but we still are.
Yeah.
The younger generations are just in general more left, and even the older. You're seeing so many that are finally starting to wake up.
Nothing kicks harder than a dying animal.
Yep. Exactly. There's so much fear for the amount of change, and we're fighting. And I know some people call it. This is why I think this podcast will end up being really interesting for both of us, because you are definitely more willing to say, like, just straight what you think, and I'm like, let's take a step back and let's look at it from this other side, because for the people in MAGA, and I know some of them are just absolutely horrible people. I will admit that there are some people in MAGA that are just so bad.
Yeah, but I know in every group.
But I know some people that supported that I talked to that supported DeSantis before he started running, that just liked stuff that he said. They aren't bad people, but they are older and they have grown up year after year after year after year being told socialism is bad. Socialism has never worked. Look at these other regimes that call themselves communists. Look how bad they are. They don't really know anything about any of them. They just know what they've been told. They didn't grow up with the internet where they get to talk to people and interact with people from all across the globe for their entire life, so they know that things are different. The idea of having your entire perspective just 360 is, in the end, I don't think there is anything more scary, especially for an older person who grew up understanding the world and now feels like they don't understand anything.
No, there's actually a psychological phenomenon, and I don't remember what it's called, but it is something that prevents them. They naturally want to resist that evolution because they've spent so much time, believing these one things. So it's not just shifting this one vote or this one perspective. It's shifting an entire lifetime of votes and perspectives, and what their votes maybe have done to get us to this point. That's a huge ask, to ask somebody to, take a solid look. And how many of us have a hard time admitting our faults?
Yeah. I've talked about my level of deconstruction of my Christian faith, which, I've said didn't take me out of the faith, but I definitely deconstructed and had to look at things that I've been taught. And I realized what I'm seeing is not what I've been taught and all this other stuff. It's painful. It's painful to admit. You see it when you talk to people that have believed these things forever. The idea of even it's either all or nothing. When I talk with people about it, it's either you love Christ with your whole soul, or you have nothing to do with them. They can't even fathom the fact that I'm still a Christian, but I have changed the way I believe based on my experiences and my discussions and stuff that I've read. They just can't, their brains cannot fathom the idea of taking, 5 steps back as opposed to just leaping off the ledge. To them, it's leaping off the ledge, not taking some steps back.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's super interesting, to discuss your deconstruction, because for so long I've watched Christians deconstruct their faith and really come to terms with what has become of Christianity. And it's kind of been this outsider's perspective. And in recent months, I've had to do the same thing with Judaism. And when an absolute whirl it has thrown me, it was painful. Like you said, that first week post October 7th, I felt like I had been through a breakup. There was no other way to describe the emotions that I was going through at that time. I just, like you said, my entire world picture and, what I had learned about my faith inside of 12 hours had been completely overturned. I'm no longer watching the deconstruction process happening from the outside. And I don't even think that the deconstruction process now is just happening, on a religious level. Our deconstruction process is happening on a global level. We're seeing people not only break apart their own faith and their religion, but we're also starting to deconstruct our governments. We're starting to see, through the lies that we've been told.
Yeah.
And I think that is an exceptionally painful period for humanity as a whole.
Absolutely. And you're seeing it in so many countries.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about, there have been reports in Germany of their far right talking about, getting rid of, what is it, the immigrant? There was a video you posted about it of the far right German. They weren't in the government, but there are people that want to get in the government that have already had conversations about how they're going to get rid of any non-Germans who immigrated to Germany. And it's but that's happening everywhere. Every country right now. There's a massive battle going on between, I guess I'd call it we like to say that people aren't empathetic. We're just empathetic in a different way, because if you grew up in the internet and you see and you're used to looking around and seeing what's going on in all the countries, you can't help but become empathetic. It's you can't escape it. Where the people that are very focused on themselves and the people around them that are still living in the bubble are mostly people that didn't grow up with that. You know, you learned all your information from watching the news and reading the paper, and that's it. I've said that I truly believe that in the next 10 to 15 years, you are going to see the world change. And I know people want it to happen faster. I understand it. Lord knows I understand the desire to make things happen the way we want it faster. As much as I understand the issues people have with the Democratic Party, and I have called them out just as much, since I have been a voter, that's all I can really fully talk about. There have been 3 months that the Democratic Party has had a supermajority in the Senate to actually make changes that they wanted to. 3 months. And Obamacare was passed in that time. There's a lot of people calling out the desire that they should have changed more. They should have fixed more. This law should have been passed. This should have been codified. This should have been codified. If you don't have 60 people in the Senate, unless you can convince 10 people from the Republican Party to vote against what has become a very messed up party, we can't get the Republican Party to agree with themselves, let alone to agree with Democrats.
I guess it just goes back so far, right? Like, and I think that's where the frustration really stems for so many individuals, is because, look, we were facing these problems when Obama was in office. We knew that, Roe was a potential problem for us. We had an opportunity to codify this then. And I'm going to preface this by saying, I love RBG. I love her. But had she stepped down in the 8 years that Obama was in office, yes, we wouldn't be here, and so much stems from the fact that, it's just that so many people feel disenfranchised by a Democratic Party that they feel just hasn't been listening to them. Yep. They were saying that then, and they knew what consequences we would face. And they told us we were wearing tinfoil hats and we were crazy. And now Roe's been overturned and women have lost their bodily autonomy. Yeah.
Yep.
I think the frustration is in a part, again, look at the primaries, right? Like you said, so many of us are independent. And so Biden won his election from those independents, not from Democrats, by independents. And you touched earlier on, MAGA, and we've kind of coined another term on TikTok known as the blue MAGA, those people that you're talking about that are Biden no matter who, right? Mm-hmm. They won't even question him. And that's our problem. It's like you're just backing him without questioning your leadership. That's that same mentality. You're not holding him accountable for his actions. And that's where people are getting frustrated. But again, they're not even willing to listen to us when we say, we never expected Biden to run a second term. We've always wanted them to primary, and they're still handing us an incumbent despite constituents.
Yeah. The struggle that we have as a society is we don't want to actually understand where other people are coming from. And I get it. I really do. When we make statements that are absolute about somebody else, we basically say, we don't care what your reasoning was for saying or doing what you did. You're just flat wrong. Mm-hmm. There are people that are scared to, and again, I understand you've talked about Project 2025. A lot of people have talked about Project 2025, and I understand the arguments that if Project 2025 was really a big deal, then they'd be talking about it. The fact is, whether or not they should be scared about it, they are. And we already know fear is the biggest driving factor for anyone to do anything. And until we learn to start having conversations and stop trying to scare everyone to death, mm-hmm. we're always going to deal with this problem.
Yeah, I can agree to that. And let's talk about Project 2025, right? Because this project, and it scared me too, right? I had no knowledge of this until somebody dropped it in my inbox, and I spent 12 hours devouring.
I remember reading it.
Yeah, it's terrible. But then, like, we get up in arms, and it was a scary read. But in months following, we find out that this is something they've been doing every 4 years for God knows how long. Since the 70s, they write one of these projects. Now, have we seen this play out? Yes, absolutely. And that is scary because that means that this has been going on behind the scenes since the 70s. But also, this has been going on since the 70s.
Yeah. Yep.
So yes, it's scary, but it's nothing we haven't been facing already.
I think a lot of people in this country put far more weight on the presidential election than we should. Because of the division that has gone through our country, the presidents have exercised executive orders more than they ever used to. But they're using it more because the House and the Senate are less likely to work with each other than they ever have been before. But also because we focus so much on the presidency and not state, local, or even the federal other positions, we don't, like, I keep saying, Democrats, anybody else, if you really want to change things, can you imagine? Like, I haven't seen anything excluding the current foreign policy of Biden, which I know we can have a whole separate discussion about. Which again, I know your position, and I hope you know the kind of position that I'm going to take, which is not quite as extreme. But forgetting that, I have not seen anything from Biden that says, I don't want to make the life of the people in this country better.
Yes, he's great domestically. Internationally, he is a disaster.
And that's a whole issue. Let's be fair. Yeah. America's international policy has been wretched for a minimum since Reagan, if not before then.
Oh, yeah. I would argue since Truman, it started going down the hill, like having studied what I've studied.
Yeah. Since World War II ended, because America was so segregated, separate, they didn't feel the damage except for Pearl Harbor. That was the only damage that the United States felt. So while everyone else was building back, they became the superpower. And since then, we have been throwing our weight around every chance that we can get. And regardless of whether or not you believe we should have, that was America's policy to grow. And so forget the foreign policy bit just for now. Biden has shown with the UAW forgiveness of tens of thousands of student loan debts for people and other Democrats. There's definitely a desire to help the people. And it's just, I just want to be like, give the Democrats the ability to do something for one term. For goodness, really do something. Like a supermajority in the Senate and the House, and let them show what they have the ability to do. Because, like it or not, they have definitely done more in general for this country with not having that than the Republicans have.
Absolutely. And I've for years said, that the Democrats have long been blocked by Republicans who play dirty. Like, there's just no two ways around it. But again, where so much aggravation is that we have played so noble as it's like, at what point do we acknowledge that's the game we're playing? And we have to play that game to a point, because they're not going to play noble, why have we discussed packing the Supreme Court? Like, I completely agree with you. And prior to this foreign policy, I was Team Biden all the way, backing him, because domestically, he is great. He is great on paper, and he does take a stand against some of the Republicans in office. But, again, we've just seen, it's almost like an honor code that they're just unwilling to, and I admire that. It's so much a part of what makes the Democratic Party great. Yeah. But at the same time, it's so frustrating. Well, and see, and this is, and this is where it also gets
it gets complicated, right? There's such a desire by human nature to want everything to be black and white, but it is not usually, I'd say 95% of the time, it's really not black and white. So let's take Biden, and again, I can guarantee you and I will do a whole podcast just on Biden and the current foreign policy, but I want to just jump on it for 1 sec in the sense of just showing the not black and white.
Yeah, go for it. Let's do it.
Just like with religion, this and I'll say this even for me growing up, he has grown up in the Catholic Church being taught that Israel is this, it's important, it's needed, it's a must-have to protect Israel because Israel is the land that God created and gave us, and all the other things that go with it, which I don't know Biden specific, what he specifically believes on all of those bits and pieces. But I can guarantee you, growing up in the Catholic Church, if I heard it in the non-Catholic Church, I can guarantee he heard it in the Catholic Church. He is also having to fight, though, like when he thinks of, I guarantee is one of those, when he thinks of Israel, it's just what he's been taught. You go with what you've been taught. And
kind of the problem with the whole thing though, right? Like,
exactly.
I mean,
that is the
Jewish
problem
people,
with 100%. We are fighting against, and you see it breaking. I mean, I obviously broke from it, but to say I'm a Gen Xer and think what I do, I am definitely an anomaly for my generation.
I'm a millennial and you are the Gen X. I get it, but I think it's part of how you were raised.
Yeah.
Like
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's why I still consider myself a Christian. If I didn't grow up around the people that I did, taught the way I did, be able to have the conversations that I did, I would look at Christianity the way that people that have left the church look at it, which is why I don't get angry when they get mad. But going back to you see the chinks a little bit in Biden. You see, he when it first happened, he was all gung ho, and whether or not you believe that he was talking to them behind the doors, chances are he was in some way, shape, or form. But you've heard bits and pieces of that armor chinking based on the absolute ridiculousness of what's going on right now. Yeah. So, but that's the issue that we're dealing with as a country, is we've got people that have grown up with seeing the world one way, have been told it their entire lives, and then a new group, the millennials and Gen Zs are coming in, and they've seen the world completely differently. Not only do they see the world to be completely differently, their experience of the world has been so much more global that they don't look at their neighborhood as their world. They look at the world as their world. And what we're seeing now is just the conflict of both of that. And it's going to take time to work its way through.
I said it on my TikTok before. I equate the internet to Gutenberg Press, right? When the Gutenberg Press came out and we had this massive amounts of knowledge that were available to us almost overnight, you saw an enlightenment occur, right? And it took time, and it took hundreds of years. But it was the Gutenberg Press. It was the printing press and books that started that. And now we're seeing that same thing take place with the internet. And I'm a Zennial, so I had middle school without the internet, and then high school changed. And you remember, like in middle school, it was like we had to write pen pals, like actually write them.
Yep, I remember.
I tell my husband all the time, I have the coolest pen pals in the world, and I don't even have to put a stamp on it anymore. Yeah. I talk to people in Egypt. And we've been able to break down these stereotypes. And you're right, it is again deconstruction on a global level. Yep. But my concern for Biden is, but I want to touch on what you said when we discuss Biden is, yes, I do believe that, he's grown up hearing these things and believing that, that Israel is, impertinent to the safety of the Jewish people. And we've all heard that, but I wonder still what's going on is that there are so many people that just, for whatever reason, won't be able to get behind, that they won't be able to get behind it But what you said earlier is that we've put so much stock into the presidential elections that we have failed to look at the most important part of our elections.
Yeah.
So let's say the president's, what's going on right now with the presidential election, it will likely be the lesser of two evils. And there's just not a whole lot we could do about that, but we can change the rest of the House and the Senate.
Absolutely.
We have all of the power in the world to shift this election in the way that we want, even if that comes out with, I keep thinking, like, if we can shift the House and the Senate in the worst case scenario happens and we end up with a Trump, then we can spend the next 4 years doing to Trump what they have spent the past 4 years doing to Biden.
Yeah.
But we can only do that with the House and the Senate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I've said this before, if we could get a 2/3 majority in the Senate, it wouldn't matter who was in the presidency.
Yep.
It would not matter.
Yeah.
And that's the part that people just do not. In so many ways, the fact that a 2/3 majority in the Senate can counter anything, because we have the Electoral College, the Senate is more important than the House or than the presidency. If we could get the House and the Senate and a 2/3 majority in the Senate, it would not matter who was in the president, because the House and the Senate could put a bill, the president would veto it, and then the Senate would go, nope, this is happening. So stop focusing so much on Biden or I think, me personally, if after the primary it's between these two people, I can't look at Trump and Biden and say that Biden is as bad as Trump. I just cannot do it. It's and I understand. I know I know what you're going to say. I know what you're thinking, and I get it. I just cannot do it. And maybe it's because I'm also fighting this war on the Christian side of things, and I know how he is being revered by Christian nationalists in this country, that what I see if Trump gets into office is that side of things getting worse.
Yeah. And I wrestle with this. I mean, I'm losing sleep over this because, what happens, it's not lost on us, right? But those same feelings that you just like, I think about getting into a booth and voting for somebody that's doing what's going on. And I mean, I'm Jewish. Yeah. And I think about the Holocaust, and I think about what we now know, 11.5 million people that lost their lives. I just I hear all of these valid arguments, and I understand them, but I cannot stop over empathizing. And I've said it before, I imagine myself in their position, and all I would have wanted was somebody to say no. Yeah. So I think but it's so hard because you're right, because what we're faced with is, what do we, it's I've never felt more like we're being pitted against the lesser of two evils. I mean, we say it every election, but holy cow. Yeah. And, so do you believe though that based, and again, I don't know everything that you agree with what I say, but if I'm right, and that what we're dealing with right now is we are at that tipping point. We are almost at that, almost exactly at that 50-50 tipping point of people whose worldview is much more conservative, and then 50-50 on, and then you got the much more on the progressive side. That, I think, is where we are experiencing the issue in terms of, we've said it, globally, they're all dealing with it. We already know in Israel that they're dealing with the fact that, 2/3 of the population really does not want the current government in. Yep. They're asking for Netanyahu to step down. They would like to see him step down.
And but so this is where I say, how do we as voters, as human beings, empathetic human beings, wrap our heads around the fact that we see what's right and wrong. And we believe And this is where I want everyone who's listening, I want you to try and take yourself and attempt to not just put yourself in what you see of Biden, but try and put yourself in what it means to be a president, especially in 2024. We like to say that it's just obvious. You just do this, you just do this, you just do this. So let's just take our country. Biden is a moderate Democrat, an old moderate Democrat in a insanely divided federal government, along with an insanely divided, all of the states are at each other's throats. He's trying to talk to a country that is divided with other countries that are divided. And this is where I don't know the answer. I know what I think, but there's this part of me that just goes, while we know what the simple answer is, we're dealing with other human beings. And it is never simple dealing with other human beings, especially in other countries that, whether or not you like it, are not America and are technically controlled by America. And I know we have some control via what we give them, but they are still their own country. So how do we wrap our heads around this confluence of truths that we have to move forward with?
But I think people's problem is it because yes, the situation's incredibly hard, but how many of our people here in America, 60% of us disagree with what's going on over there. And he's saying there is absolutely no red line for the amount of support that we will provide to Israel. And that's really hard for people to get behind when there's a genocide going on, And I mean, we're not talking, and there's so much argument about genocide, right? But the International Court of Justice has found sufficient evidence to at least research it, to determine. So I guess that's the part, is that constituents don't feel like their voices are being heard. They're calling the representatives. And despite that, we're still seeing policies move forward in our government that we don't want to see take place. Yeah. But I also think, like you said, what we are again looking at is, what does the Red Party do if they are put into office that looks worse than what we have right now? So I guess, there is a group of individuals that I'm working with that are really starting to focus on the party, not the person. Yeah. Right? We can't look at, Biden. He's old. He's always going to be old. There's always going to be these problems. And, we can't look at, as much as I hate to say, we have to start dealing with AIPAC and that money in our government, but it's not going to be something we do overnight. No. So how do we deal with this in the short term? And their solution is the party, not the person. We have to vote the party, not the person. And, but again, I think we have to deal with the stark realization that I don't know that we're going to get enough people in there to vote for what's going on over there. And I think if we ignore that, we're going to be in a whole lot of trouble.
I think something started. I will say this. Something definitely started. October 7th started something in this country. It opened eyes to at least more of the reality of our country. We'd already started, but it definitely opened the eyes a little bit further as to the reality. AIPAC for a second. They're bad, but they're also just lobbyists who are doing what every lobbyist has done in our country since lobbying was allowed.
Yeah. It's time to get rid of that, right?
And that's the key that we need to remember. There's the desire to get anyone who took money from AIPAC is understandable, except for the fact that lobbying is just something that everybody has been doing. Everybody. And if we have a political system that requires you to take super PAC and lobbyist money in order to actually continue doing what you're doing, trying to tell someone, well, some people have gotten hardly any money from them, to tell these people who, again, have been hearing, Israel is good, Israel is important for their entire life, to just magically, to hear we're just not going to take it anymore. Especially if you saw the video the interview of Jimmy Carter, where he said, even back then, it is understood if you say something bad about Israel, you will get primaried. So even the people that disagree with it strongly because of that situation were forced to continue supporting it because we're human beings and we are very self-serving in general, whether we want to admit it or not. And the idea of the amount of work some of these people do to get in office, to find out 2 years later that you're going to get booted because you stood up against Israel when you knew that it's such a difficult situation. And let's be fair, money and power is definitely at the core of a lot of this issue.
Oh, absolutely. And you're seeing a huge movement take place, especially on the progressive left, of individuals that are simply not going to put their vote behind any kind of candidate with AIPAC money. They're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Again, we've seen, because if you look at how much control, AIPAC and the, I want to call it Zionist lobbies have here in America, it is overwhelming. The only other lobby in this country that has that much power is the NRA. Full stop, and could you imagine letting Russia
maybe
in here
pharma
with
too?
Yeah, that's a good one. But could you imagine letting Russia in here with that kind of power?
No, but Russia was never considered an ally up until this point.
That's true. But in my research, do you know how much? I mean, I know we all spy on each other, but
yes, we do. Even allies spy on each other a lot.
Yeah. Yes. So, it's just, there is definitely, there is a fear that if you go against the Zionist lobbies, you will lose the money, the vote, the support. That is a ginormous problem within our government. And actually only one president, and that was Eisenhower, that believed, Eisenhower and JFK, that believed they were going to be able to make it through the elections without the Zionist vote.
Yeah.
Well,
Jimmy Carter, I don't know what Jimmy Carter did, but I remember him saying that he didn't really have to deal with AIPAC or any of that either because he wasn't expected to win. He was such an out of nowhere winner that they didn't get a chance to do anything, which is why he was one of the most hated presidents by Israel because he did not have their claws in him at all, which is why most of the stuff that got done to fix any problems were done under him over any other president.
Yeah. And he's still known in Israel as an anti-Semite, which is absolutely, see, that's the problem. Again, and I'm Jewish. So, and part of Judaism is you question everything. You're explaining to me your faith and how you just take in you take it and you trust it, you believe. That is not Judaism, man. We take it in, we question it from every 55th angle. So for what is supposed to be representative of the Jewish people to say never question us is a ginormous red flag to me. Because we are supposed to question everything. That's a very tenet of Judaism, is to question everything. So the fact that Netanyahu wants you to sit back and not question things, it's scary. And you should always be able to question a political movement. Full stop.
Yeah.
It never should have been intertwined with Judaism.
But your statement is an example of the laziness of especially the American people, if not a lot of people around the globe. We don't want to do the work to find out the truth. We want someone to tell us what the truth is because then it's easy. That's why the Bible is so idolized in Christianity, is because they just want to be told, you do this, you're going to heaven. You do this, you're going to hell. It's easy. It's black and white. And it's just, but it's not that simple. It's not. Yeah. The world is not simple.
I've been thinking about this, right? So, because really this is a continuation, since I've started my research, we're just continuing what ended in 1945. This honestly is a continuation of World War III. We are meeting ahead of the foreign policy choices that people in our government were pointing to back in the 50s and saying, if we don't deal with this now, we will come to a head. It will end up in a world war, and we've been told this for so long. And like you said, meanwhile, so many people have been told that we need Israel. We have to protect Israel, and like what happened is you had an entire generation, right, that just came back from a world war, not one world war. They had fought 2 world wars, right? They were done.
Yeah.
They just wanted to trust they wanted to trust their government. I keep thinking about the generations and that they just kind of stopped paying attention. And I think it's because they were so tired. They had just fought. So, and we're looking now and we're seeing what took place in the 40s and the 50s and this so much that led us till now.
Pretty much every decade from the 20s to the 70s, 60s, there was some war that the United States was in because we decided we were the police of everything. And again, this is not saying one way or another whether it was good or bad that we took part in it, because we already know the crazy that is North Korea, and Vietnam was very different. That is definitely one we should not have got in. But that was one from my research where our intervention ended up causing the problem that we got ourselves into. Korea was different. Korea was just bad. But by the time Vietnam was done, the reason Vietnam ended the way it did was everyone was just sick of it. Was so sick of being at war. Because I think you're right. Once we got to that point where we were so sick of it, we were willing to pretty much accept anything as long as it didn't mean we were, going to war, which is why, which when you think about it, could also be why we put so much support into Israel throughout the years, because they were considered our only allies in the Middle East, and Islam was dangerous, and look at all the bad things it did. But we had someone there who could give us a place to be, a place to house our troops, a place to, get information from, whatever. So
But do you want to know what I found wild is that actually in the 50s, Iran was considered our biggest ally in the Middle East. They were considered the biggest democracy, and we kind of saw some shifted opinion. And again, that's all just, paperwork. I haven't been able to do peer reviewed research. But I feel
maybe I'm misremembering, but Iran didn't get bad until basically the religious group took over as the government for them. They were as democratic as any Middle East country really is as a whole, but they became very uber religion controlled.
Yes. Oh yeah. Extremism hijacked Islam much in the same way that extremism is currently hijacking Judaism. So in the same way,
and Christianity.
The extremes, yeah, exactly. So across the board.
Yep. It's and again, as we said, this is why conversations need to happen. This is why I think it's important to say outright what is right and what is wrong. But I do also believe it's important that we understand that the world is more complicated than right or wrong, because there are people that have had different experiences, that have had different everything, and see the world differently, or see how we get there differently. And as long as we consider ourselves part of a constitutional republic, democracy, whatever, the people want to decide we are, as long as there are, 40% of the United States that look at things from a different angle, they are still Americans and they still have a right to have a voice in it.
Absolutely.
So we need to learn how to find the common ground in order to actually move forward, because right now, no side wants to find common ground. They have taken one piece of bad, not arguing that the piece of bad is bad, but because of the bad, they don't want any other part of them. And again, Are there really bad people? Yes. And I would argue there are potentially really bad people on both sides.
Both sides. Absolutely.
But for everybody else, for the ones that are more on the extreme side but aren't that extreme, that's where we need to be able to find the places where we can agree. And that's where we build. I've said this about the laws that we make in this country. Laws that are made by the federal government for everybody need to be ones that support and protect everybody, no matter your race, religion, identity, anything. And if any law that is put out there goes against one group, it should not be a federal law. If it endangers the lives of Americans for whatever reason, whether you wanted it to or not, it shouldn't be a law. It becomes a choice at that point. Abortion. Someone can be pro-life. I know there's new terms now, but pro-life personally. Like, you know, if I ever get pregnant, I'm not going to get an abortion.
Same. But I will protect the right for anybody else to have it. Yep.
Everyone should be allowed to choose. And especially, this is my biggest thing about something like that. The fact that people's lives are being endangered for reasons that they should not. Like, again, forget the argument of what week it should be allowed. The fact that there are people that are having, ectopic pregnancies or getting arrested because they had miscarriages, that automatically just means that whatever they have set up as a law should be gone, because the fact that there are people that want to give birth, that want to have the baby and can't because of something, and then are not being allowed and having their ability to have children endangered, their lives just in general endangered, the threat of being arrested, all of those things, the fact that those things are happening to people that want to have kids, the part that the anti-abortion people are arguing has nothing to do with those people, means the law is wrong.
Absolutely. This is why, we fought for this back for this reason, so that those very people could be protected.
Yeah.
That is why we have fought this time and time
again. That is why Roe v. Wade was 23 weeks? Mm-hmm. Because they found a place that they could mesh at 23 weeks, whatever it was for Roe, is the point in which a child can survive out of the mother's womb. So they said, okay, then after this point, you can't do it. And it made sense. But the fact that 26,000 people in Texas are dealing with
it's insane.
That is wretched.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot imagine having to see. I love my daughter, but I cannot I can't imagine being a woman having to go through that in the first place. But to be a woman and have to see a baby that happened because of an essay, and the fact that they're being forced, and they got people with their full chest saying they'll learn to love the baby, and it's like, are you
making that woman look at her trauma every single day and forcing her? I can't imagine. My brother dated a woman who got pregnant by an essay. If she had the baby, she had to put it up with adoption because she knew there was no way that she would be able to look at that child and not see the person who essayed her.
Yep.
And not relive that trauma every single day.
Yep.
And how hard it must have been, and how it continues to be on her.
Yeah.
I couldn't, but, and the thing, and too, when we're talking about that 23 week, the thing that so many people think is that women are walking into the clinic at 23 weeks and just saying, most of the time that late, it's a medical necessity. It always is.
There is no way you can go 23 weeks.
Yeah.
with a child inside of you and then just go,
Yeah.
eh.
I changed my mind. Yes. If we're, like, honestly.
I mean, I know some parents are probably like, I am ready for this child to be out, but it's not because they don't want the child. It's just they're ready for the child to be out.
Yeah.
And by 23 weeks, you're not really, it's like, it's not until the third trimester that you're really like suffering.
Yeah, it was bad. By then, I'm so done. Like, yeah, I remember by my fourth pregnancy, by the end of it, I was just out, get out. I will try whatever. Just get out. Never again.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
So, and that's a thing too. If you have never carried a child, you don't know what it takes of your body.
The fact that 95% of the people that are making the laws are men, or it might even be less. The fact that there are women that are supporting it boggles my mind. But the fact that men are the ones that are mostly pushing this is the stupidest thing in the world. Like, I have never in my life, I mean, I've always said, I'd be just as happy if the world was completely run by women. But I have never thought that more in my entire life than after the bills that are being put for the anti-abortion and the anti-LGBTQ. Like, the men as a whole in this country, in leadership at least, are showing me that they don't have the mental capacity to care about anyone else but themselves and their desires.
Yeah.
That is what it has shown me.
Yeah. I'd say it's across the board, and not as a judgment. It's how our society has reared men, right? You just don't understand the full. My first baby was born, right? And my ex-husband asked if he fed it water. Like, seriously, like, I mean, it's just something in our, like, and my best friend, who was an attorney, thought that, our delivery date meant the doctor knew when the baby was going to come. It's just like,
yeah. I mean, there have been
education.
There have been all those TikToks out there where people ask questions about women's anything. And it shows that they have no clue what's going on. Yeah. But in the same respect, these are the same kind of people that believe that, what was it, like having your period was the equivalent of losing your virginity or some no, it was tampons. There's actually adults out there, mostly old people, but adults that think that women shouldn't wear tampons because it's the equivalent of losing your virginity.
Oh my God. It's just insane to me. Like, it's just, how do we not know more just about a woman's autonomy? And before we're making laws about our autonomy, right? And if